Hello everyone and welcome to session 2 of the NFT Insider held here at BLAXK by ActionCity. My name is Deborah Lim. I am curator and junior partner at Chan Hori Contemporary. We were formerly a commercial art gallery at Gilman Barracks, and we have now rebranded as a curatorial agency and consultancy. So we still run pop-up events, festivals, exhibitions, and we work with both Southeast Asian artists and Singapore artists, and also further afield. Today, I'm very excited to have a wonderful panel, an all-female panel at that, with participants from different industries, and we're talking about the art of NFTs. So NFTs have been a big buzzword for many months now, but as a curator, I'm thinking about how we address meaning in NFTs, how we talk about creation, about quality, about depth, and I think that's why I wanted these ladies here today. I'll do a brief introduction for all of them, and then we'll come back with more specific introductions. So first, I have Karen Tan, who is the founder of the Projector. And the Projector is the preeminent independent cinema in Singapore. And they're really a space that celebrates diversity, and they also hold a lot of events. She's also founder of Pocket Projects. And you're trained as an investment banker, correct? And an architect. So here we've got investment banking, architecture, and cinema. I've got Huiling with me. She's a tech entrepreneur, and she's the founder of an early-stage stealth startup called Ziggie. And you've also been part of a pioneering blockchain company that's been behind one of the fastest-growing blockchain communities in the world. I've got Audrey Lim with me, creative consultant. She's been involved in almost every facet of the entertainment industry, from hosting to music management to radio. So I'm so happy to have you all here with me today. Now, I'll bring it back to the first question and also some introductions. So maybe you could all tell me, and I'll start with Karen. Let's think about hybrid experiences, the physical and the digital. How has the Projector or some of your experiences and your background contributed to this topic?
Right. So I think that's an excellent question because, it's also timely because, because of COVID last year. I think we were actually forced to kind of sit back as a business to evaluate, what exactly we're doing, why are we doing it, and how do we take something that's very much about a physical space and bringing people to a physical space to be together and to interact. How do we take that actually to the other extreme where there isn't a space and everyone's really far apart, and how do we still bring people together and create meaning out of that and carry the ethos of the Projector into that realm? So I think that's actually, it's not something that you have like there's no kind of one answer to that, and we're still exploring. But I think that's a really interesting kind of trajectory that we're on, which we continue to explore today as well. But what we did last year, obviously, the obvious was to create a streaming platform. So we did that in under 3 months. Quite interesting. I mean, you get a bunch of creatives who are not tech people to create a streaming platform, which is very much tech involved. That was a journey in itself. But now we've got something called Projector Plus, which is our streaming platform online. We also then kind of looked at, delivering popcorn and all that stuff to the people who are watching. We did all these Q&As and talks and panels and director Q&As like online as well on StreamYard and Facebook. So that was that element of also digital virtual events as well. But going back to the original topic, I think it's what does a hybrid cinema look like which exists both in the real world and also in the digital space? I think that's a really interesting question and an exciting one that we'd like to kind of explore going forward. And yeah, so we're on that journey. I think one milestone for us would be to issue NFTs, just because it's fun, and also to enable like our community to also participate in our growth and in our exploration. So yeah. That's a long answer to a short question.
Thanks, Karen. Huiling, what about you? Maybe you could speak about some of your experience with blockchain?
Yeah, sure thing. I think before I speak about my experience with blockchain, though, I'll probably give a little bit of introduction to my own experiences to do with like a hybrid between the offline and the online sort of world. So I was actually trained in the legal services industry, which isn't exactly like a very digital industry. So it was actually really by chance and by sort of fortune that I went into tech right after. So I went into blockchain right after law. Like it wasn't even something else. It was right into cryptocurrency when it was still nascent. It was just in 2016 or 17. Something was brewing in that space, and I wanted to get involved. So I think it was really eye-opening because I think it was like my first foray into the tech industry proper, and it was then that I saw, wow, there's so many things being built in crypto at that point in time. A lot of projects were flying, and then there was also a lot of investments, a lot of really mad speculative things going on. But I knew that something was sort of bubbling, just that sometimes certain directions weren't the best for that industry. Hence, I think it also took a number of years before, we start seeing the loads of innovation that we are seeing now as compared to what it was back like a few years ago. But yeah, I was also really interested in art as a kid and, through all my years, dabbling in both non-digital, meaning painting, sculptures, a lot of those things in my student years, and then also going into digital painting. So it was always this sort of hybrid between the non-digital and the digital that sort of characterized a lot of my years and my foray into the tech industry as well. And then later on, when I went into blockchain, I really saw, how a lot of projects were coming about. People were actually building like different realities online, which actually did mirror some of the offline realities that we saw. Like we see a lot of financial innovation that's happening on the blockchain that mirror a lot of the financial stuff that we already see happening in the real world, except that now they're happening in a much more accessible, digitized, democratized fashion. So these are all very interesting themes for me, and something that I'm really interested in that I'm still exploring or on the cusp of exploring. It's how do you bring together creators and artists who are dabbling in both digital and non-digital art together so that they all enjoy and reap the benefits of what the digital world sort of promises us. So anyone who's like dabbling in things to do with painting, sculpturing, installation art, is there a way that we can sort of bring them into this digital fold as well so that they get to build their audience, reap a lot of the benefits that some of the digital artists have already found? So these are all topics that are really interesting to me and that I'll be happy to sort of explore more of.
Thank you. Speaking of that, bringing the physical to the digital, Audrey, I've got the perfect example with you where you've brought the live music festival into the metaverse. Could you tell us about Take Back the Nights?
Take Back the Night started at the beginning of 2020, before we even knew what DorsCon levels were. So we knew that the people who played nights, so by that I mean musicians who play in bars, hotels, lounges, all of these people were suddenly asked to wind down their operating hours. And again, we knew there was something brewing in some place called Wuhan in China. We didn't know what that was, but somehow that was impacting us in Singapore when events and traditional music events were being told, okay guys, you're gonna end a little bit earlier. So that was very confusing for us. And these people, when we play at the same venue every time of the week, we call that playing nights. And Take Back the Nights was us literally saying, we're going to have that back now, thank you. It was a situation where we could see the writing on the wall. So I got a few of my friends, different volunteers from different aspects of the industry. And initially, we came up with what we thought was a very original idea, a live stream. But in the context, as it played out, we realized everyone was putting out a live stream. And that wasn't something that was giving us the outreach that we were hoping for. So we decided to look at the structures again, and we decided instead to create something inside a video game. And in creating this world inside this video game, we realized quite by accident that we had created our own metaverse where people could come through, interact with one another, make decisions, active decisions about whether they wanted to go over here, whether they wanted to go over there. It was all specific examples that you had the autonomy to make, and you could, to jump off the point about physical into digital, you could go up to a digital vendor and purchase cookies and have those cookies delivered to you in your home. So we did try to bridge that gap a little bit and bring something that would not have otherwise existed in the digital realm, a music festival, make that experience something that it could be accessed by everyone from home, regardless of where in the world you were.
Fantastic, thank you. So that's about the physical and the digital. So let's hone in a little bit because it's an NFT Insider series. I want to know what NFTs represent to all of you. And by that I mean, beyond of course the fact that it's digital, a token, maybe more philosophically what it represents. Huiling, do you want to start first as to what the NFT movement kind of signified to you when it started growing in traction?
Yeah, sure thing. I think the interesting thing about NFTs is that I guess, depending on what kind of involvement people have in the space, it's like it means something different to a lot of people. So I think at the very surface level of it, I would say that NFTs represent like a digital ownership sort of sentiment. Like it represents a digital collectible. You can collect NFTs, so that at its essence is what it is, but it also represents it's also a digital representation of ownership. So let's say, if we want to talk about you owning something that's physical, but can be represented through, NFTs, it's like if you own the NFT, you could own the physical thing as well. And then if you go into a deeper level, it's almost like it represents your ownership or your participation in a community. Because what is NFTs being used for now? A lot of artists, a lot of creators, a lot of people are using NFTs to establish their own little communities, where, I could issue like an NFT, distribute it to, my followers or my community members. They feel like they are getting something from me, and they feel good when they participate in this community between themselves as well. And because of that, I think we're getting at something deeper. It's a little bit like collective belonging. It's like, I'm part of this group where, I'm engaged in a couple of different activities. I like my fellow members. And I think that speaks to the essence of what communities are all about, since the very beginning of time. Like humans have always been searching for places to belong, searching for, societies, cultures, like where we can assimilate into different groups. And, it could be by interest, it could be by, because we like certain singers, we like certain bands. So NFTs is kind of like broadening out the scope of that because, right now, anyone, you could be a company, you could be an artist, you could be a singer, you could issue NFTs, and then it brings people together. So that's like at the heart of it, I think.
Yeah, Karen, do you agree with that? Because you're a cinema, you've got members and a fan club. How do you feel?
Yeah, no, I think I totally agree. And building on that, for us, we've got a community around the projector, and, I think NFTs, in a way, in the most simplistic form, it is also, they have been used as like social identifiers, right, online. We've got, the bored apes, and after that, a whole series of other animals. Like there's a whole menagerie out there. But so that's one aspect of it. But I think ultimately, if we pair it back, for me, it represents empowerment and ultimately, more freedom. So, if you're a creator and, if you're an artist and you're issuing your work in the form of NFTs directly to your audience and to your supporters, you're free to, sell it to anyone globally and free to establish that direct relationship with them, without the middlemen. Although galleries are also necessary to cut through the noise in the increasingly busy space. And so there's a role to play there. But then you have that option, you have that freedom to connect. And empowerment, because, as an artist, suddenly you can, there's the barrier of entry into getting your work out there is so low now. So you're empowered to do that. And also with smart contracts, you can also take a cut of subsequent transactions, right? So then that allows you to benefit from the value of your work going up as you build your practice over time. So I think it's incredibly exciting and empowering and freeing for people.
True. And Audrey, as you're thinking about fans going to music festivals, and how do you see NFTs in that kind of space?
Just jumping off something Karen said, I think it's the rise of empathy and autonomy. Empathy because for the first time, fans can do direct love shown to the people that they want to support, rather than knowing that if I listen to a particular song on Spotify because I love this artist, I want to support them, I know intrinsically that Spotify is taking a cut of that, and that the artist gets something like 0.007 cents per listen. So that would be a lot of replay buttons in order for any meaningful level of financial gifting to the person whose art I'm supporting. If I give the fans this degree of autonomy and empathy to say, I am now selecting to directly give the money to the person that I'm trying to support, that really builds such community ties, that really builds such a sense of ownership. And from the side of the creator, if I am now empowered by NFTs to directly contract with the people who want my work, I am now liberated from the chains of, say, censorship, or from directions that my label or my management group might have for me. Say they might be unwilling to take a gamble on a song that might have a political undertone. I can now directly release it to the people who would be interested in my music with a slightly political undertone without needing for me to artificially shackle myself to, oh, what is politically correct? What would be good for the longevity of my label who has decided that that's not the direction they're interested in. It really frees up and allows a really fun influx of empathy and autonomy both ways.
I think that's a perfect comparison. I had a question about experimental works, and that's exactly what you've touched on with the political undertones. Karen, do you think for film, for example, would NFTs be a place where experimental works are more welcome and more easily transmitted, perhaps?
Yes, I think there's definitely scope for that. I think it also opens up, in a way, one can think of it as a form of crowdfunding as well, if you will, right? Let's say if you're doing a student film, or if you're doing a short film, or the biggest hurdle for any producer is always the financing of the project of the film. In this case, NFTs actually give you a channel of kind of raising funding, before you even start, right? And NFTs, and you can really get creative with what the NFT perk will be. It's not just the artwork, but you get cameos, you get involved, meet cast and crew, you get all sorts of. You can just get creative with that. And then what that does is actually, for an experimental work, it de-risks it from quite a few commercial perspectives, right? One, if people are buying those NFTs to fund this work, obviously there's an audience for it. So you don't have to try and convince, the studio head that, there's an audience for this film. That's one. And secondly, there's cash flow. There's cash coming in that allows you to even start the project, which is great. So there's that. And the third thing is, all these guys have a sense of ownership of the film from the start, and they then therefore hopefully feel part of this project. So when it's completed, they're going to market this for you as well. You've got an inbuilt supporter base, which is great, and marketing is also half sorted for you. So it's really, I think, quite enabling on quite a few levels for experimental work. And yeah, I think if I were a student and I'm trying to put out a film, this is something that I'd definitely be looking at. And I think this will empower also films that are like less mainstream, not just short films of student work, but like more indie films, and as you rightly point out, slightly more controversial stuff as well. Yeah. It'll definitely allow, I think, more marginalized groups to get their films to screen. Well, hopefully, and and the audiences can also then have the autonomy to choose what they want to see, as opposed to having to wait for studios to decide what actually makes it to screen, for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of Chan Hori's own personal experience, we always try and bring art into the conversation, especially when we're extending the conversation to industries like architecture and like technology. And I have an example of Speak Cryptic, for example, who's one of the first few artists in Singapore to sell an NFT. And I think when he did enter that scene, and of course, he's always been a bit of an in-between, in the same way that Chan Hori is an in-between. It's a difficult space to navigate, and you don't really know what your audience or who your audience is. But when he entered the NFT space and he gained traction, I think that was a huge motivational factor for him to continue producing work. And the fact that he was already creating digital works And that was also separate from his physical drawings. It was really complementary to his artistic practice and moving forward. So I think it's really opened up that scope, for artists that work in a native format also to take on these roles. I mean, for music and for film, it's always been in a kind of digital format. Do you think that NFTs are a natural evolution? Is that how the industries go from here, Audrey?
I think it allows something that was always a bit of a hiccup to be smoothed over. And that specific thing is royalties and residuals. I think that's something that it's a pain point for a lot of musicians in particular, because at present, with our current copyright system, which just got overhauled in November, the responsibility is still squarely put on the musician to telepathically know that, oh my song was used in a television show in Korea, or my song was used on a radio show in France. And if you don't happen to know that someone is using your work, you cannot report it and they cannot pay you for it. So you run into this quite silly situation where, on top of creating the work, being able to do promotion for the work, you are also now supposed to enforce the fact that people are using your work, which is such an onerous thing. I feel that NFTs sort of like shortcut this. And now, instead of just one poor person, the creator, having eyes on the project and where their project winds up, you are decentralizing it to everyone on the chain. And of course, this is assuming that no one pirates it, because again, piracy is going to be a thing, no matter where you are, no matter what your art is. But it allows you more direct access of not needing to track down what is being done with your work. And through freedom of contract, it also allows the creator to specify what they want done with their work. So for instance, Kings of Leon released an NFT album, and in that NFT album, as part of the contract, they have specified this is only for personal use. And that's something that, contracts, you can as long as both sides are willing to agree to it, you can put anything you want in it, which is a blessing and, a bit of a curse sometimes. But in this situation, it allows that greater autonomy on the part of the creator to demonstrate what can or cannot be done with that work.
Nice. Maybe, Huiling, I can go to you, because we've spoken a bit about Web3 and how this may, even with the platform you're creating, explore ways of financial innovation for both creators and collectors. Do you want to expand a bit on this idea and what it could mean?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, this is actually a good question that ties back to something that I wanted to respond to Karen's earlier descriptions. So what I think really enables a lot of artists and creators to work on experimental works now is the broader notion of Web3 beyond just NFTs. So I would sort of subsume NFTs under Web3. And Web3 allows a lot of different new mechanisms that were previously in existence but highly regulated, highly limited, and be able to finance artists and creators with their new works through that. So for example, you could use like crowdfunding, token funding in order to raise funds. And through all these new mechanisms, like an artist or a creator can figure out that, look, there is an audience, there are buyers who are interested in my work. Like I have the funds and I'm able to do it now. I don't have to necessarily, sacrifice the original ideas that I have, or, tailor my ideas in order to fit the whims and fancies of like a larger or higher power in order to make something that suits their taste a lot more than something that I wanted to do in the beginning. So I think Web3 and NFTs are like it's kind of like we are on the cusp of this new economy. And moving on from that, beyond just looking at how there are new business models or new ways of financing that are enabling creators and artists to finance their works, we also see how Web3 is enabling a lot of consumers, a lot of average users of the internet to be able to earn tokens, earn economic incentives, financial incentives through activity that wouldn't have generated any economic activity in the past. So for example, you could be awarded or rewarded in tokens just for browsing ads or for verifying content. And all these things are little bits of ways in which I think the economy is sort of getting a little bit more democratized. It's like people are finding ways to be able to generate income and be able to partake or participate in this new system just through all the different kinds of activity that they have always been doing in the past, but that they now have the autonomy and the freedom to be able to financially benefit from, instead of it just being the big companies or the big tech companies that are leveraging off them. And something that I also wanted to add to your initial question on experimental works is that what I really like about NFTs and Web3, it's how it's shaping audience participation in the works as well. And I think this is something that's really important in experimental works, because from time immemorial, audience participation has always been, sort of like a factor in, experimental works of certain kinds. Looking at how audiences' live reactions are, getting audience to be that, other party within the boundaries or the constraints of the artwork itself. It's almost like the audience is one of the performers or one of the ones who are participating in deciding how this artwork is going to go. And I think this notion has actually gotten amplified because of Web3 and NFT, right? So just very recently, I was actually evaluating whether to participate in this NFT sale of this French artist who started out doing street murals. So he's a bit of a political activist / artist. He used to do a lot of street murals to do with, certain sociological or political issues that he, had some comments on and stuff. And recently, or these 2 years or so, he's been publishing a couple of different NFT sales on, some of his projects. And the way it works is that he released, he would sell a bunch of Genesis NFTs. So Genesis NFTs are basically, NFTs that are at the inception of this entire creation. So there are different rules, like for specific projects, they can put in different mechanisms, but his was such that, let's say if you hold on to a Genesis NFT, you could mint or create a first generation, you could then wait a couple more weeks or a couple more months and then mint the second generation, etc. So there's basically some inbuilt time rules. And the cool thing about this was that I thought that this actually enabled the audience or the buyers to participate in his artwork and determine and decide what the fate of the artwork is going to be. Because by holding on and buying a Genesis NFT and deciding whether they want to mint the next generation or not, and then whether they want to hold it for, do they want to hold it for a few years, or do they want to get rid of it? And do they want to, succumb to speculative tendencies? Like, are they holding this just to trade? Or do they hold on to it because they believe in his political ideals, and then they will decide the fate of where this is going to go? Are there going to be, are all the tokens going to be minted? So in that sense, it's like the audience is playing like a direct role or a direct part, right, in deciding the fate of this artwork or this project.
Thank you. That's great. That's a great observation as well, and thank you for that story. I'm thinking, we're speaking about mechanisms. I mean, when I was in Paris recently for a show with Speak Cryptic, we had a collaboration with Horace Vertier, who is a French artist-poet, and he's also minting NFTs. And he describes NFTs as a tool to kind of take collectors on an adventure. It's not necessarily, of course, it's a digital platform and it's an extension, but really this idea that you're bringing people into the fold, you're guiding them and thinking of new ways of collaboration. And of course, there are new NFT marketplaces that are being created with artists and collectors together. And that's unprecedented. We don't think about the gallery system and working that way. So I think that's fantastic. I want to go back to, we've spoken about mechanisms. Let's go back to the art itself. If I was a collector, if I was just starting out and I want to buy NFTs, how do I know what I'm looking for is genuine, that it reflects artistic integrity? Are there things that you've kind of observed in the artists, the NFT artists that you follow? Or are you on the lookout for specific qualities? Perhaps, yeah.
I think a lot of the problems that manifest in this cowboy town of NFT land is that it's very painfully easy to rip someone's work. It's very painfully easy to copy someone's work. And a lot of the times, they're quite open about it. They will name themselves like Rylan Rips. And it becomes very, very clear that they are, for example, taking a CryptoPunk and they're just mirror imaging it. And they're selling that as a brand new work. What a lot of platforms are now doing is they are taking the first barrier approach. And some of them, for example, Mintables in Singapore, I'm quite aware that they have a round table of people who will overlook everything that crosses their desk to say, have we seen this before? Does this look original? Is there like a Google reverse image search that we can do on a very basic level? And that's something that Mintables is doing right now, which I found quite interesting to hear. This I found out on Twitter Spaces a couple of nights ago. So good for you, good for them for trying to help start this ball rolling. However, I think by and large in this new space, because it's so open and because you can't possibly have perfect knowledge, unfortunately, caveat emptor, it's still on the buyer to do their due diligence to make sure that the work that they are purchasing, number one, the person selling it has good title, meaning they are actually the owner and they're not just like right-click saving and then selling it as my own work. It's still incumbent on the person purchasing it to do that little bit of homework, which if you're about to buy digital art, you should want to do anyway. So I think that would be one simple way. Google reverse image search is my number one friend. Number two, what I do personally is I just find out a little bit about the artwork itself and about the person who creates it, whether there's any sort of red flags, any sort of red flags that tell me, okay, this is a problem. I check the rest of their body of work. If they only have one, that's a problem. If they only have three and they're all three very different styles, that's a problem. So these are very small things that you can do as someone who is collecting the works. That's something that you can do to protect yourself, because unfortunately, not a lot of places are equipped. They're still playing catch up to try to ward off the copycats, ward off the pirates. And like people who are trying to work around the bounds of legality, they usually exploit the holes faster than people can fill in the holes.
Karen, what about you? I mean, you collect physical art as well. And are there certain qualities or values that you're looking out for that you then would apply to the digital or NFT space?
I think largely it's a similar approach for me. I think it's, when I'm looking at digital art, it's about instinctively if there's a connection or if there's something fascinating or interesting about it. And everyone's different, right? So you kind of react to it. And for me, that's kind of what I look for. There's a whole other, series of things that you have to do to kind of maybe ensure that you're not buying something that's fraudulent, which is quite well outlined. But, and I think in the first instance, what I also kind of look at is the artist. So I kind of either reach out to them if possible, or so at the moment, I like to collect artwork from artists whom I'm friends with or whom I know. And and then I understand a bit more about like why they're doing this and like what it means. I like those stories and I like those personal connections. So so I know if my friend is minting this and this is the drop, it's not fraudulent. So that's one way of doing it. Just get to know the artist, because in this day and age, it is now possible to actually reach out to them directly. That's one of the whole points of this. So that's one way in which I approach that.
Thank you. I mean, Huiling, you're talking about creating a platform, right, for creatives. So I'm sure you're also looking out for these factors, right? What kind of establishes the artist as a committed artist, locked into the digital space? Are there things that you're looking out for as well to showcase the meaning or the intent with the artwork?
I think so. All the factors are pretty well outlined already, so I'll just add what I can. But I definitely just generally follow the same guidelines. Like, I usually look out for artists who already have some sort of a body of work, or at least, if they have a portfolio online, whether it's on a social media or it's on their own website, I can follow it, and then I can see that they have made, consistent progress. It's not like they are just putting up one piece of work, because usually if there's only one thing there, then it's a little bit funky, because I feel like, I don't know where this work is from, would you have taken it from somewhere else? But if someone has made consistent efforts, you can see that they're progressing, they have a body of work that speaks for themselves, then I think that's usually a green light for me, or a green flag. Yeah, and then I also looked a lot at, whether this person's intentions or this person's story, like what is it like? And I mean, for me to establish that, usually I like to establish personal contact with the person, whether it's through chats or something else, understand a little bit more about what they are trying to do in their field of art, whether it's painting, it could be, making films, a series of videos, doesn't really matter, but what is it that they're trying to portray, what's their story? And then from there, you can better establish, whether this is like the right fit, what kind of artist this is. Yeah, and then on a personal note, I would also look out for, recommendations or referrals from friends, family, or anyone, who thinks there's someone out there who has a really good story and who has a really good, really good intentions, really good ideas, and, trying to do something about it. And then I would just sort of get in touch as well.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Like, if I had to port what you said into the physical art world, we always look for content and narrative at Chan Hori. It's never about the commercial value. It's about what is this artist trying to say, how have they come up with their intention, and that's really, really important to us. I would also like to draw attention to a conversation I had with Yacine Terai earlier, and he was talking about how, in the NFT space, everything is so fast-paced, the changes are so quick, it's so volatile, you get swept up. You could stay up 24 hours a day trying to track everything that's happening, trying to adjust your artistic practice to whatever is the flavor of the moment. So he was saying that it's really important that if we think about mental health, and also keeping yourself sane, keeping your artistic integrity, and then navigating these waters, so much of it comes from self-awareness. And that's what I always tell our artists as well, especially younger artists, that it doesn't really matter so much about branding, right? If the work is good, if the content is good, it speaks for itself and it's strong enough. So yeah, underlying factor. I think maybe we could go into a final question of the future of. So where do you see perhaps the future of cinema, the future of a tech platform related to the blockchain, the future of a music festival? Does it sit in the digital space? Is it both? What's the biggest ambition,
Well, can someone else take the question first? Big question, the future of cinema.
Big question.
There is already in existence a small handful of virtual music festival experiences that have all come up quite organically, simultaneously, in response to the collective trauma that has been the COVID-19 pandemic. I feel like we are in a space where if you have not been open to the digital, this is your time to catch up, because there is no way, you're not going anywhere. This thing seems to be, Rona is hanging out for as long as she wants to, right? She's not going home. And it feels like this is the time for people to either make their peace with it and continue with physical festivals, as we have seen happening in some parts of Europe, with the results varying. Everyone's had their different mileages with this. Some people are like, oh, I'm going to catch it anyway. I'm just going to bite the bullet and just get corona and be done with it, right? So that's one school of thought. There's another school of thought where they are now trying to polish up the digital alternatives, and the first generation of digital alternatives being the Zoom festival, Zoom concerts, or the live stream concerts on YouTube. Those were not interactive and immersive enough. So what is the next step? So the next step in my situation was to build something within a video game setting, but there's so many other alternatives, which we're now slowly seeing in terms of VR, the AR, the AI ways of crossing digital boundaries through your screen. I think that that's not going to go away for a while. And I think that that might actually be beneficial to promoters of physical festivals, physical conferences even, because now they are able to have an additional stream of income for people who, for whatever reason, are not able to travel physically to that festival, physically to that conference. They are now being able to sell a ticket to that person to say, hey, you can now stream in, and it's not just a passive press spacebar and watch something on a screen type of experience. It's a more physical, interesting experience. And I think that where there is money to be made, there will be a lot of interest in putting more funding, putting more eyes on this project, and seeing how collectively, not just for music festivals, but for events, conferences in general, how we can develop this space and reach out to a much larger audience that we might have been unwittingly overlooking because we were focused on the physical.
Huiling, do you have a kind of future of scenario or what you envision NFTs will take us to?
So I'll answer these in two separate parts first. So the first to do with NFTs. I think personally for me, and back to what Audrey said a little bit earlier also, I'm actually really interested in the idea of immersive, not just immersive technology, but immersive art, and putting these two together. So it's like immersive art tech, sort of. Because I think, as what we've seen during this, pandemic period is that a lot of the original or current technologies that we're using are just not immersive enough. It's causing people to, be drained, causing people to actually be burnt out and stop using them. So, Zoom was really great when we first all started using it. Yeah. It was nice to meet people over video because we couldn't step out of our houses. But generally, by and large, as the months went on and you had, all of a sudden 10 Zoom calls in a day, you sort of start filtering out. You don't want to go for all 10 calls anymore. You just want to go for maybe 1 or 2 which are important, see which ones you can say no to, and then just sort of, make sure that you just don't sometimes turn on video for some of them. So I think what's happening is that we are seeing definitely the current technologies are good, but we probably want something more, or something that's, that lessens the boundary between digital and reality and doesn't make it so taxing to, have to straddle two sides. And what I'm really interested in is seeing how, such immersive technology can be applied to art and gaming. One thing, because for art, I think we've always been trying to figure out, whether there's a space in which all of us, especially those who like art and that see a lot of art, that we can be immersed in. We want to see and feel this immersive experience around us. And I think the fact that the metaverse is rising as a hot topic of contention suggests that we might be inching a lot closer to this reality than we might be prepared for. Mm-hmm. But it is also a really exciting time, because what that means is that when all these things start to blur together, whether it's art and gaming, we might be able to start experiencing a lot of different adventures that we wouldn't otherwise have been privy to. So for example, instead of just playing games as they are currently, maybe we could play it in VR form, and beyond that, maybe not just VR form, but think about it as something that's really tied to our lives. Like we could sell our characters, sell our skins in a much less friction way, be able to actually make tokens or that can be converted into real currency for the things that we are doing in digital worlds, and let it be seamlessly translated to the offline world. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm quite excited about that, because right now the current systems aren't the best. There's a lot of fraud going on, it's very messy, it's high friction, and everybody's trying to look for ways in which things can be interoperable, where the games can sort of seamlessly transition to each other as well. So that's personally what I'm interested in. And as for creators and artists on the blockchain, what I'm looking forward to is really seeing how we can empower and enable a lot of the current artists and creators who are using offline formats, non-digital formats, like they're doing canvas paintings, they're doing oil paintings, and they haven't quite fully leveraged the power of social media, haven't quite fully leveraged the power of blockchain, to be able to understand how these could benefit them, could help them build an audience, and could actually help them and their fans and followers even, participate and benefit in financial incentives as well. So I think that's probably the key to building, something that's of a virtual cycle, where everybody can sort of, benefit in ways that are practical, and yet also help each other out, help each other be better, do, their craft better, help each other write better feedback and better critique, so you build like a really good community.
Ooh, fantastic. And Karen, what about you for film or cinema, perhaps?
Okay, so maybe, I'm just going to pick up on where you left off. Not necessarily specific to film at this point then. But yeah, the idea of kind of enabling and also kind of building a community and an ecosystem effectively that is sustainable, that's really attractive and really exciting, because we can actually, that is community, that's community building. Just looking at film itself, where's cinema going to go with all NFTs and crypto? Well, how long is a piece of string? But one thing that's kind of obvious, though, is that, unlike sculpture, unlike a physical artwork, I mean, film is in digital format already, much like music. And so it's easy to kind of like translate that into an NFT product. I mean, so obviously the first steps, and I think once the studios saw what happened with Top Shot and the NBA, they realized that people are willing to buy moments, right? And what is a moment in Top Shot? It's a scene in a film, effectively. And so I think the big studios are all now going, oh my God, they're looking at their film vaults and their film libraries, going, shit, we've got this whole asset class and inventory that we have in our film vaults that we didn't know existed before, which can be monetized, right? So I think going forward, all the studios are going to be looking at how they can maybe monetize their franchises. So, Star Wars, Harry Potter, you name it. You can see how, how it could kind of pan out. I mean, the avenues are multifold. But I think what's also rather more interesting is that, you then have the Davids and the David and Goliath, the little guys, who are also then able to benefit as well. So touching on your point, so for example, if you're a digital artist and you've done or if you're a costume designer or a set designer and you've done some amazing work in some film, there is also an avenue for you to also maybe monetize, your concept art and your work directly as well, if the film. So you can benefit from, the film's success. So I think that's pretty exciting. And I think from the projector standpoint, so that's kind of like from, and the other thing is that, films are now, I think, going to, there's been an interesting project where it's not just scenes, but I think a whole feature film's been minted and sold as an NFT. That happened late last year. It's a film called Zero Contact, and it stars Anthony Hopkins.
Wow.
It was shot during COVID. They did it all on Zoom, and they minted, I think, 11 NFTs. And basically, the rights are owner consumption only. But that was a tester, and they were sold. And so I think there's, the studios are going to start looking at, what formats NFTs can take. And also, I think we've talked about the whole funding model as well. That's also going to change. Recently, there was something called the Arabian Camels Film Community, and they issued NFTs, and they were kind of raising awareness and also financing for a $50 million feature film called Antara. And I think they just recently dropped NFTs this month. And so basically, if you buy one of those, I think that gives you rights to the revenue streams, the future revenue streams of that film. So they're starting to be able to also monetize part of the IP, not all of it. I think that, it's maybe about 50% of the IP of the film. So funding models are going to be explored, and they'll change. And that overall enables a lot more talent and hopefully a lot more work in terms of diversity and inclusivity to be seen on screen. And from the projector standpoint, I guess, so that's all like the film production supply side of things. So what's interesting for me is from the exhibitor side, what does this mean for us as well? And I guess the projector isn't just a cinema that whacks film on the screen and that's it. You watch it and you leave, but it's more than just passive consumption of film. I think we actively try to build a community around our brand, our spaces. And so, how can we also enable our community to, produce work and, with less friction, or enable more talent to sort of come forward? And how can we support them? How can we build maybe an ecosystem? Such a big word, but I think we can then maybe take the projector community into, an exciting sort of digital realm. I don't know if it means literally building a cinema space in the metaverse, which would be very trippy, because if you're watching your screen yourself, you're watching yourself in a cinema watching another screen. I think that's a bit too meta.
I did that. People were like, "This is weird."
Yeah. So we, I don't know if translating the projector cinema into the digital realm literally means building a digital immersive virtual cinema. I'm not sure, that might be too literal, but I think the idea is, how do we take that community into the digital space, and what do we enable them to do? I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, taking your point, I love technology, and I like to look on the optimistic side of technology to say this is a tool, this is a platform, but beyond that, it's an enabler, right? For artists, for organizations, for hosting, for moderating, all of that. And I think the NFT space has so much potential to really push how we experience the arts in different forms, and also participate in it, and also explore different funding models to support that system and continue its progression. So, I mean, from the visual arts community, I think about how galleries would look in the metaverse. It's not a white cube. You could be flying. How do you explore digital art? How do you explore film and music? And I think it's so exciting. Thank you so much to the three of you for joining this panel. I'll give a shout out to the next session, which will be session 3. This is the NFT Playground, and this has been the NFT Insider series. Thank you so much.